This time I have a Tascam 133 3-channel cassette deck. This is a cassette deck that would have been used by radio stations or other operations which required a Q channel. Anyway, let's take a look at this one. Apparently it doesn't work. This is the Tascam 133. This is a stereo tape deck with queuing capabilities. It has a Q channel on it, which you can select from channel 3 or 4 for queuing, but it's actually only got 2 audio channels, although I guess it could record on this as well. So it could record on the 3rd track. Looks that way anyway. Never worked on one of these ones. Guy that owns it says he replaced the capstan belt and it started slowing down. Well, when I checked it out here, fast forward and rewind work, no problem. Put it in play, nothing happens. So we may have a bad motor on this one, so let's pop the top off it and take a look and see what is going on with this one. So the owner of this one changed the capstan belt himself, so we'll open it up and figure out what's going on. A little bit quieter and not quite as dusty here now as it was a few hours ago. I was going to start working on this earlier, but they were tearing down 2 houses on the next street over, and the amount of noise and dust that was kicked up from the demolition, I figured I would just put doing any recording on hold until the noise settled down a bit, because well, you thought the saw was bad. Alright, so here's the top off this one, and it's got a belt on here, as you can see. Capstan motor does not appear to be turning. Oh, now it is. So why didn't it turn before? Maybe it had a dead spot, because I just turned it and it started to move. Interesting. Does sound to be going a bit slow. Interesting. Yeah, it sounds like it's going slow. Even though these units use a 4-channel head, I think this is still only a 3-channel deck. It does have queuing functions, so you could record a 3rd channel, a 3rd track onto basically track 4 in a single direction. So you got your tape playing, you're recording track 1 and 2, and track 3 is left blank as a guard track, and then track 4 is the cue track. If I make a recording on here, which I've already done, on the cue track, you will hear, if I play it back, you'll hear the queuing signals. And it's going to play backwards, obviously. Now if I listen to the queuing output, the queuing track output on here, I'll put the queuing track on the right channel, we'll hear what's on that track by itself, which will be the main program going backwards. If I turn the tape over, you'll hear 2 different programs. You'll hear what was recorded on the main part of the tape, as well as what I recorded on the Q channel, which is completely different. So here's the main output, and here's the Q. Now there's also a queuing function. Hear that tone? There's a Q pulse you can put on, which is a 25 Hertz tone. Normally, what a deck like this would be used for, you wouldn't be recording audio. You could record narration or whatever you wanted, but you wouldn't be using it to record audio. You would be using it only for actual control tracks. So, in other words, So if we put this into record mode, we're able to play back the main track. There's nothing on the Q channel because it's being erased now, and if I wanted to mark the tape, I would just hit. I've got the monitor obviously on there. What that's for, it's for the auto preset. So you can set the unit so that it will play from one portion and stop at the next. This would be for automated operation, for example. So now when I set it to this mode, there we go. That's how it works. So you set your counter to 0 at the start point, and you hit your Q pulse at the end point, and then it will, if it's set to rewind, it will rewind and either stop at 0 or play at 0 when it hits that tone, or BOT is beginning of tape. So it'll either go to the beginning of the tape and stop, or go to the beginning of the tape and play. And I have the choice of telling it just to stop or to rewind. So in this case, if you had a bunch of tracks on a tape, you could tell it to stop when it hits the Q point. Right? Then when you started it again, you got the next track playing until the next Q point. This would be useful for in a radio station, for example, if you had a bunch of commercials on tape, or you had field reporters
or network news stories
cutting their stories, and you had all their stories on tape ready to go, and then you had your live announcer who'd be reading the news, and then he's going to go to a field story, and he just hits, and the story plays, and then when the story's over, you put another Q pulse there, and it will stop, and then it goes back to the live announcer. That's what the machine like this would see, then it'll stop. So that way you could have all your stories lined up for your newscast and go to your announcer in the booth, and then he's announcing something that's coming up, and then you go to your field, or you've got a commercial, you go to the commercial or whatever you're going to go to, and then once it stops, he's back on the air. That would be what that feature is for. Anyway, that's playing with this machine. This machine came in because it slows down and stops. And well, when I first started it up, the capstan motor was totally dead. So I'm going to have to let this thing run for a bit and see if it will slow down or stop, or maybe we can get it to stop. I think the motor might be problematic. That's what the problem might be. There might be a dead spot on this motor, so let me just check that out and see. Because it definitely did not turn. You guys saw it on camera. It did not turn. And then I opened it up and I just happened to move it and it started spinning. So I think there might be a dead spot on the motor. And that's precisely what it is. There's a dead spot on the motor. If I try to push play, which I am, nothing's happening. Now if I just give this motor a nudge, it will play. So that's the problem with this one. We got a bad motor. I wonder whether I can fix this motor or whether I'm going to have to try to find one. I don't even know what motor it is. I'm sure it's probably just a standard motor. Nothing fancy, but now we know what needs to be done on this one. So let's get started. So the problem is the motor has a dead spot, and it just so happens that it's every time that the lock screw is in the 12 o'clock position, it is dead. It won't turn, right? If I just move it a little bit off of there, it'll start right up. If it stops anywhere else, it will start right up. But if it stops in that one position, if I move it back to here, for example, it won't start. I don't know at this point whether this motor can be swapped out for a standard motor, because it is a dual speed motor. It's got 3 wires going into the motor itself, like right into the actual, I don't know if you guys can see it or not, but it's not a conventional motor. It actually has a transistor mounted on the edge of it, but if you look here, it's got wires going right into the motor itself. So I have a sneaking suspicion there's a frequency generator and servos and so forth on this that are connected to this board. So replacing it with a run-of-the-mill basic cassette motor, I don't think is an option on this one. probably the original motor is going to have to be sourced, whether that's available or not. This is a Tascam, right? So Tascam is Teac, professional division. Whether they're still handling parts for this or not, that I don't know. That would have to be contacted to Teac in California and see whether they've still got any parts available for such a unit like this. Ultimately, replacing the capstan motor is really the proper way to do it. Possibly could be taken apart and the brushes and armature and stuff polished up. That might work. That might be the only option, is to do that to make it work, because it's a pretty old unit. And I don't know that parts would be available for it. And finding another old machine like this to take a motor out of, well, that's playing Russian roulette, because it's all the same age and these motors did wear out after a while. But anyway, that's where we stand on this one. This one's got a bad motor. So I believe it's these two small screws here on the bottom and on the top. And once these are out, the deck itself should come right out. This whole assembly should lift out. Or maybe it'll pull out through the front. It might pull out through the front. No, it should come out from the back here. It's got to free up some wires, I think. And then it should just unplug. Being like no different than the DAT machines, you can pull the mechanism out for service. These were designed for quick service for when they were used in a professional application. So a couple plugs down here that hold the deck in place. These ones are already disconnected for the heads, and that should be all I need to take out. And we have to take out this one as well, cut off this one, unplug that. That's about it. I think that should do it. Looks like someone's had this out before, or that was put in with zip ties just to make it easy to take out. I think that's all I got to take out, and then this whole chassis should pop right out. There we go. The deck just lifts out. There's one more wire harness that's plugged in. Oh, I didn't have to take those ones out. Okay, well, the head plugs in. There's two plugs for the head. One plugs in there and the other one plugs in under here. It looks like it's this one. Yeah, I don't even know if I'll need to take that one out, but the deck is out now so that I can access the motor. Let me just unplug that last cord so that I can get this whole entire chassis out of the way. It's right down there. That board's on a hinge, and oh, here they are. There's one there and one back here. Undo those two, and now the entire transport just lifts right away. As I have no desire to reinvent the wheel, I don't really want to take this entire mechanism apart. So I'm going to remove the belt from remove the pulley and remove the belt. Slip my pulley out there if I can, so I don't have to take this whole mechanism apart. Oh, that's kind of in the way. Well, we'll just kind of move that out of the way. We'll probably get the motor out now anyway. I'm just going to pull out the three screws that hold the motor in place. That way I can just drop the motor down without having to tear the mechanism apart, because the fewer things one has to take apart, the better. Now I can remove the motor from the back and the pulley off the front here. Just set that aside and set the screws over next to it. As you can see, this motor's got a bunch of wires going to it, more than just the standard two. It's got a transistor mounted on the side, but it's got 3 wires that go right into the motor itself, and then this transistor with 2 more wires. So there's actually 5 wires going into this motor, which makes it a special motor. It's got 2 adjustments on here for the speed, for fast and slow. I'm thinking this motor probably does have a servo on it. I'm hoping I can take the motor apart. It looks like one that can come apart because there's a screw on the motor itself. So let's just pop that screw out and see whether this motor will come apart. I'm hoping that it will, that I can get to the guts and try to clean up the stator and the armature. So to back off the motor there's an insulating layer here. This peels off. Now with any luck I should be able to push the motor through. Maybe not. We'll get undo this screw, I'm sure, as well, for this heat sink, for this transistor. Okay. Will the guts pull through on the motor? Well, the motor comes out. Now we've got the motor itself right here, another unit, and it does have a frequency generator on it. That's what this is. It's got a frequency generator coil. I don't know that I'm going to be able to do anything on this motor now that I've got it down to this point. It's not a standard motor though, so if I can't make this one work, a new one will have to be sourced, and that could be a problem. Well, here's one. $400 US, out of stock, for a new one. Lots of used ones that are being offered, but I would not trust a used one. But so replacing it with a new one is probably not going to be an option. I can try to spin the motor. I've taken it off the board, left the board over here, get the motor powered up directly by my power supply. I'm going to see whether I can. There's the dead spot right there. I'm going to it does have this separate coil though, so the actual rotor is, or the contacts are up here. There's a second coil in behind here, which is for the speed, right, that goes to these little wires here. These are a frequency generator that generates a signal as the motor rotates for speed feedback. That's why the motor is as expensive as it is. It's not just your standard run-of-the-mill cheap DC motor that most cassette decks had. This one here is a little more expensive because, well, it's a positive feedback motor.
I'm giving it 12 volts, limited to 50 milliamps right now. You can hear how unstable the speed is on it just due to the brushes or commutator being worn out. I don't have much hope for this motor, to tell you the truth. It's in pretty rough shape.
Sparks arcing away in there. See, down the contacts down there. I can see that. I can see the activity. Can you see the little sparks in there, the blue sparks? Maybe not. Maybe if I get the camera in a little bit closer. There is where the actual problem is right down there. I'm only giving it 12 volts now at 30 milliamps. So I've had the motor running now for quite a while. Let's just see if I can find that dead spot again. And I got it running at like 6 volts now. Yeah, I still got a dead spot right there. Yeah, it still has a dead spot. So unfortunately, this one is going to need replacement. Let's see if I can get into this motor. There's the back half of it off. Will the coil come off of here? I might be able to push this whole thing through. There's the rotor. Okay, I got the motor apart. I wonder if I'll be able to fix this thing. Oh, you know what? The contacts are burned. That's what the problem with this one is. They're actually burned. The brushes themselves. Look at the brushes. This is why this one was... Well, there's our problem right there, you see? It's burned right off. The brushes are shot on one side. That's why it would stop. If it stopped in a specific position, it was not making contact. So this motor is unfortunately beyond repair. And because it's a special motor with a FG pickup, you can't just replace it with a run-of-the-mill. It has to be replaced, and they're ridiculously expensive. As I tried looking some up just for the hell of it to see what they cost, and well, used ones are going for over $100 for used motors, and I would suggest that a used motor may be worn out like this. This is obviously a very high hours tape deck, and I would imagine that a lot of these out there may very well be high hours because somebody wouldn't be parting them out if the unit itself was good, right? If the deck itself was in good shape, nobody's going to part it out. They'd sell the whole deck. So someone parting one of these out is a deck that's not repairable for another reason, like a head is worn out or something else is wrong with it, so they're parting it out. So I wouldn't touch used parts. New old stock, as I looked one up, even though they didn't have stock, they had one listed at $400 US. This motor is not worth no $400. So unfortunately, I'm just going to throw this one back together. There's nothing more that I can do on this one unless we can find another motor for it. So I'll just reconnect the little circuit board again, and we'll throw this back together. It still spins, right? But the problem is if it stops in that dead spot, it's not starting up again, and that's the problem. And the guy that owned it said it was slowing down. Well, it probably was because the motor shot. So I guess 1 out of 3 for this fella. He sent me 3 units. The SLVR 1000, that switcher, and this. 1 out of the 3 are fixed. Not very good odds, but that's the way it is sometimes. When you're dealing with this old, obsolete crap, it's a lot of times there's not a hell of a lot one can do. When you run into parts that are no longer available and that type of stuff, there's many times there's nothing really you can do. That went in first, and then this other one on the back. And then there was another metal cover that goes over top of this. It kind of holds it all together. I tried to contact Teac earlier today. Of course, they're no longer on the West Coast, they're now on the East Coast. And when I tried contacting their parts department to ask them if they had a motor, all they told me was that this was obsolete and that they no longer carried any motors for this device. So basically they told me what I kind of was expecting, is that you're not getting any parts for it. Because I think what's happened now is Tascam and Teac, they've basically sold out, and they're now just a name like everybody else, right? Okay, motor is back together. I'll reassemble the unit and we'll see if it still works. It should. I tested the motor when I put it back together and it spins. Right, it's back together. That's about as much as I can do on it now, unless a motor can be found. I'll say thanks for watching.